On the 19th of July, the Orthodox Church celebrates the memory of Saint Macrina the Younger. Macrina was the elder sister, childhood teacher, and spiritual guide of two of its greatest theologians, namely Saints Basil the Great and Gregory of Nyssa. The holy ascetic was named after her pious grandmother, a disciple of Saint Gregory of Baghos and brave survivor of the late 3rd, early 4th century persecutions of the Church. Yet she also bore the name Thecla privately, since her mother, Saint Emilia, had seen the eponymous martyr, virgin and disciple of Saint Paul in a dream whilst pregnant with her. Following the death of her fiancé, Macrina chose not to marry and aided her widowed mother in raising the other children of the family. In her capacity as spiritual advisor, Macrina helped Emilia bear the accidental death of her son Macrina, as well as establish a monastic community on the grounds of her estate with her serving women. Gregory especially praised Macrina's fortitude and wisdom, as evidenced by the dramatic dialogue between the two that he recorded regarding the psychosomatic makeup of the human person and its ultimate destiny. This dialogue is commonly titled On the Soul and the Resurrection. As demonstrated by his representation of his sister, Gregory considered Macrina the Christian equivalent to Socrates. Such great admiration for a woman on the part of a bishop of late antiquity, a man who tradition considers a father of the fathers, attests to the egalitarian aspect of orthodoxy, that the state of holiness, including the divine knowledge which this entails, is open to all. Here is my modest attempt at summarizing the amazing philosophical dialogue, to give some indication of Macrina's profound mystical insight. To this end, I have used the popular English translation published by St. Vladimir's Seminary press. In the first chapter, Gregory describes the grief that he felt whilst relating the news of his brother's death to Macrina, and upon seeing the latter on her deathbed. Gregory challenges the ecclesial perception of the soul and its fate by asking what happens to it when the elements comprising its material frame dissolve and return to their own kind. In response, Macrina censures the Epicurean philosophy, which likely motivated Gregory's query, specifically the way in which it prioritizes the observation of natural phenomena over the contemplation of their intelligible principles. In the second chapter, the Nicene requests a definition of the soul from his sister. By means of analogies pertaining to the fields of medicine and astronomy, Macrina argues that it can be comprehended as a life-giving intellectual essence which governs sense perception. Whilst examining the rational process involved in the creation of the water organ, the Mother of the Church refutes the idea that human nature features only a kinetic power which affects appearances of intelligence. Macrina then rebuts her brother's accusation that she has confused the nature of the soul with that of God, distinguishing the image from the archetype whilst maintaining that they still share a certain likeness. She also reveals the soul is not subject to contraction and dispersal, and is thus able to remain united to the body despite the dissolution of its elements. In the third chapter, Gregory inquires as to whether the faculties of anger and desire naturally belong to the soul. Macrina asserts these faculties do not help to define the human person. The soul's essential properties derive from its archetype, the dispassionate God. She points out that it would be illogical to affirm that these irrational impulses are indispensable properties of the soul, since even the pagans believe that it is rational in essence. Moreover, the Church Mother argues that the prophet Moses demonstrated that such feelings are not fundamental to human nature, having been able to eliminate them. She asserts that mankind inherited such impulses from the irrational animals, together with sense perception. As indicated by the scriptures, they are not inherently evil, but are meant to be governed by reason to facilitate virtue. In the 4th chapter, Macrina identifies Hades as the invisible and unseen realm in which the souls of the departed temporarily reside. She explains how, contrary to popular belief, these souls cannot be contained physically in either hemisphere of the world. The Church Mother also refutes the topological interpretation of Philippians chapter 2 verse 10, suggesting that St. Paul was referring to angels, the living and the dead, or demons, when stating that every heavenly, earthly and subterranean creature will inevitably bow to the Lord. In the 5th chapter, Macrina explains how the soul will be able to recognize the body's elements after their dissolution, and capable of reattaching itself to these when they finally come together again. Upon Gregory's request, the Church Mother examines the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. In addition to relating this parable to the above explanation of the soul's recognition of the elements, the saint highlights its implication that mankind's original condition was entirely free from evil. Corruption and death came about from the human being's abuse of its free will, the separation of the life of the body from that of the soul. In the 6th chapter, the Church Mother continues her examination of the above-mentioned parable. She believes that it encourages the faithful to free themselves of their fleshly attachments, so that they may enjoy a painless transition into the next life. Gregory challenges her early affirmation that every irrational impulse in us is quenched after our purification, on the grounds that this would eliminate mankind's desire for God. Macrina in turn describes how the soul will no longer require this impulse when its archetypal beauty is restored. It will abide in God's infinite love without ever experiencing satiety. In the 7th chapter, Macrina relates how the soul is naturally attracted to God. She indicates that the soul will incidentally experience pain as it is rid of earthly attachments and lovingly drawn back to its Creator. Gregory asks what hope there is for people who already experience much pain, knowing that more awaits them in the next life. Macrina warns that Christians must engage in asceticism and cultivate virtue, given that the sinful debtor described within the Gospels will experience anguish until their divine likeness is restored. The Church Mother then reassures Gregory that the purification process will ultimately accommodate humanity's reception and participation in the divine good. In the 8th chapter, the Church Mother contends that the Hellenic philosophers have a similar hope in the afterlife to that of the Christian flock, insofar as they maintain that human souls will be reintroduced to certain bodies after the dissolution of their mortal frames. Christians, however, differ from the pagans in affirming that the original elements which comprised the first bodies of humanity will come together again, forming the very same people once more, albeit deified. Macrina also criticizes the pagans for claiming that human souls migrate to other bodies, whether of plants, animals, or later people. In the 9th chapter, Macrina argues that humanity should not attempt to logically deduce how souls come into being. This is because not even Paul attempted to do so, daring only to assert that the created order came about as a result of God's will. Moreover, the saint contends that Christians must be careful not to claim that the creation somehow shares God's nature or is formed from any primordial material. She once again examines the intellectual and corporeal types of creation before assessing how the powers of the soul are gradually revealed in the biological development of the human being. Furthermore, the Church Mother briefly describes how human reproduction will cease at the appointed time. In the 10th chapter, Macrina studies what the Psalms reveal regarding the doctrine of the resurrection and God's approachability when considered from the lens of the New Testament. She also considers how evil will be destroyed for the sake of all people, permitting their participation in the divine life. Gregory subsequently challenges the doctrine of the resurrection in various ways. For example, by contending that the resurrected body will inherit the traits which derive from the fall, and asking whether it will consist of all the organs. In response, Macrina states that the resurrection is a mystery which must be experienced firsthand to be comprehended. Nevertheless, the Church Mother affirms that the resurrection will, firstly, mark humanity's return to its original existential state, untainted by the fall. Secondly, entail purification and corresponding pain, which can be mitigated by the virtue and attachment cultivated in this life. And thirdly, involve participation in God, the good which is beyond hearing, sight, and heart. Drawing upon 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 40 to 41, Macrina also explains how the qualities which humans share with animal and plant life, such as the need for nourishment and procreation, will be replaced by those which are divine at the restoration of the world.